Polio Now.
There you go. I paused it now. So
Thank
So
you.
I have my note here.
He's also going to talk about his personal involvement, which he's very humble and doesn't like to talk about, but I encouraged him to talk to Rotarians in our district about his involvement, so we have a better understanding of the magnitude of which
what
he
for
has made
sure.
a commitment, right?
Oh, he
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So may I ask that everyone mute themselves, please? Including Dow Lake.
I'm trying to.
Perfect, thank you.
This meeting is being recorded by the host or a participant.
It's being recorded by District 7070. So it is being recorded. Thank you. Okay, so everybody, thank you for joining us and good evening. And welcome to our December Tuesday talks. Tonight's presentation coincides with Rotary International's Disease Prevention and Treatment Month. So before I take the opportunity to introduce our speaker and facilitator, a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, please ensure that you are muted. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. District Governor-elect Joseph Siosa and District Governor nominee John Burns will be monitoring the chat, and at the conclusion of the presentation, there will be an opportunity for them to bring forward some questions. So with that, let me first introduce Dr. Bob Scott. Dr. Bob was born and raised in Edinburgh, Scotland, and received a medical degree with distinction in dermatology and chest diseases from the University of Edinburgh in 1957. Bob immigrated to Cobourg, Ontario, Canada, where he continued as a small town general practitioner, which involved all aspects of medicine. He was a coroner for the province of Ontario and investigated more than 1,200 cases before retiring in May 2003. And I might add that he was the family physician of one of the Rotarians with whom I have had the pleasure of sponsoring into the Rotary Club of Cobourg, who will remain nameless. Bob became a member of the Rotary Club of Cobourg in 1971 and served as president in 1978-79, and subsequently on many District 7070 committees. He also served on many committees for Rotary International after his year as district governor in 1987-88, and was elected a director in 1996, and was appointed vice president for the year 1997-1998. In 2010, Bob chaired the Montreal Convention. Some of you may have been there and would remember that. In 2004, Dr. Bob became a Rotary Foundation trustee and elected chair of the trustees in 2007-2008. In 2006, he began his term as chair of the International Polio Plus Committee, a position he held until June 30th, 2014. He rejoined the committee as of the 1st of July the following year as an advisor for 2 years. He has taken part in many national immunization days in many countries, including Pakistan, India, Nigeria, and Egypt. A Paul Harris Fellow, Bob has received the Rotary International Service Above Self Award, the Rotary Foundation Citation for Meritorious Service, the Distinguished Service Award, the International Service Award for a Polio-Free World, and the 4 Avenues of Service Citation. He's been named an Outstanding Leader in Polio Eradication by the United Nations Foundation, and has received the Glenn Sawyer Service Award from the Ontario Medical Association for Professional and Community Achievement. He received an award from President Zardari of Pakistan and was awarded the Order of Chad at the level of Chevalier. Bob received the Sovereign Medal for Volunteers from the Governor General of Canada, and also received the Queen's Jubilee, Diamond Jubilee Medal. Bob and Ann have been married for 62 years, and Ann is an honorary Rotarian. They are both major donors to the Rotary Foundation and members of the Arch Clump Society. They have 4 married children, 8 grandchildren, and 2 grandchildren. So please welcome Dr. Bob Scott. Now, Lynda Kay is going to be our moderator, our host for the one-on-one conversation with Dr. Bob. So Lynda Kay currently is the Director of Donor Relations and Communications for Community Care Northumberland. Prior to taking on this role in 2019, Lynda was a campaign director for the capital campaign for Ed's House Northumberland Hospice Care. Lynda took on that big role 6 months after retiring after 28 years as the CEO of Northumberland United Way. Lynda has been a Rotarian for over 25 years and is past president of the Rotary Club of Cobourg. She's been a member of the Northumberland Hills Hospital Board of Directors and is past chair of the Town of Cobourg Civic Awards, past president of the Port Hope and District Chamber of Commerce, and has volunteered with a wide variety of organizations over her many years in Cobourg. Lynda has one daughter, Elizabeth, who is married and lives in Davos, Switzerland with her husband, Jeff. So please welcome Lynda Kay.
Lynda, I think after these introductions, which are absolutely stupendous, we should just leave and go home now. I think.
That sounds good, Dr. Bob. Let's go. Anyways, I don't know if we want to do a speaker view tonight, Bob, or do.
I think we should, Lynda.
Yeah, that would be nice if it's just so you can do that by going up to the top right-hand corner and ask for speaker.
That's good.
So then we're not seeing not that we don't want to see all your lovely faces and stuff, but if we could just do a speaker view instead of a gallery view, can you do that, Bob?
I've already done it. I'm just getting rid of these ones at the side now. I'm in a full speaker view now.
Okay, you're in full speaker view and I'm in full speaker view.
Each person has to do that on their own.
Oh, you can't do it as the facilitator?
Nope.
Okay.
No, we did it.
Okay, well, we'll start from here. And so good evening. It's my pleasure to be the moderator for this evening's Tuesday talk. And Bob and I have met a couple of times, one with past District Governor Beth, and over a nice cup of tea and coffee cake. And Bob and I met on the weekend just to make sure we were all on track for this evening's presentation. So, of course, every time I talk to Dr. Bob, I always admire all he's done in regards to polio. I'm a fundraiser and have done that fundraising for many years, but I sure haven't raised the money that Dr. Bob has for the eradication of polio. I just admire him for all the work he's done there. So we talked about the first thing we wanted to cover before we went anywhere was the whole situation with COVID, because it always comes up in every polio presentation that Bob makes. And so this evening, we're going to start off our presentation talking about the COVID-19 effect and how it relates to polio. So Bob, let's start with that.
Well, you're quite right, Lynda. I don't know if you see me, I see you. You can't have a conversation for longer than 5 minutes these days without talking about COVID. And I thought, as we talked at the weekend, it'd be a good idea to have it up front, get it out of the way so we can really talk about polio, which is what we were supposed to be doing. But just for a moment, there are similarities between COVID and polio. They're both viruses. Some people get very ill and die. Some people hardly know they have it. Similarly, these two, and of course with other viruses, flu is very much similar to that. The main difference, of course, is that COVID is a respiratory illness. It gets into the lungs and causes respiratory failure. The polio virus is ingested, gets into the stomach, goes to the central nervous system, and paralyzes muscles, including the muscles of respiration. And that is why, undoubtedly, the similarity is that they both die from lung failure or respiratory failure.
One of the other things we talked about, though, was the sort of vaccine cold chain. The whole
Yes.
idea that both vaccines always have to be kept cold.
Yeah, that's right. The vaccine, and this is where Rotary's been so helpful in the polio program, supplying millions now of cold chain boxes to keep the vaccine cool while they go out, often into very hot places. And it's similar now with the COVID vaccine. Similarly with the COVID vaccine is that there are several vaccines that seem to be having a good effect. With polio, however, we've been very lucky. We've only had to make one major change in the last 20 years, which we've done over the last 6 months, and we'll maybe talk about that later. But let's COVID out of the road. You fellows who are listening, ladies and gentlemen, please get vaccinated. Please put a mask on. Now let's talk polio.
Yeah, and don't forget to get your booster too. That's the
Yes.
other thing. Yes, let's talk polio. So let's talk about the disease. There's one of 3 types, you told me.
Yep. The scientists were very kind to us when they were describing the different viruses. They did discover 3 main ones, and they called them 1, 2, 3, which was kind of nice of them. There is type 1 is still causing disease, and not very much disease, we are fortunate to say, anymore. Type 2 was certified eradicated in 2015, and certified eradicated type 3 in October of 2019. And that were both tremendous efforts to get that far. At the beginning, we always thought it would be type 1 that we left behind to get rid of, and that has proved to be the case.
So are they all wild polio viruses, 1, 2, and 3?
Thanks for asking that. That is the very distinction because of what we're going to say later. It is a wild polio virus that is eradicated. Unfortunately, there has been a mutation, and there's another polio virus around, or 2. We think it's 1, but it may just be 2. It may be 2. And they are unfortunately producing paralysis in children. That is not the wild virus.
So we're going to talk a bit more about that later.
Why not? We're going to talk about it a lot later, it seems.
So, of course, let's talk about the partnerships that have come about for polio and who's been involved in helping to fund the eradication of polio.
Yeah, well, this is where there's going to be quite a lot of change going forward. For many, many years, the partnership was Rotary International, the governments of the World Health Organization, CDC, and UNICEF. That was us. That was the core group. And we met frequently, approximately 3 times, sometimes 4 times a year. And we cooperated extremely well. There was really no major blow up. Sometimes there was maybe a little dragging of feet to introduce something new, but that was only momentarily. And actually, of course, I was at many of these meetings, nearly them all, for more than the 8 years, about 10, 12 years. And these people became friends. And I'm still in contact with many of them.
But you think, but there's some other people involved now too. Other than that.
That's what's happened over the years. I think everybody knows that Bill Gates Foundation came on side about 12 years ago now. And that was a very interesting negotiation. We had 6 negotiation sessions and I was present at 4 of them. And it was tough going a little bit, but he had a lot of money and we wanted to certainly negotiate with them and get the money. And of course, as you all know, $100 million suddenly was in our bank account by wire transfer. And I was taking a meeting that day down in Evanston, and I was told it had arrived. And we went out and celebrated that night. We did not use any of his money. It was all on me.
So, with Bill Gates coming on board, did you really think that helped to raise the profile for the eradication of polio?
Undoubtedly, undoubtedly. And I have to be very realistic, and probably being a Scotsman, his money has been extraordinarily helpful. We wouldn't be financially where we are without Bill Gates, because not only does he help us, but another of the organizations that are in the organization now is one called Gavi, Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunization. Now, this is underwritten by Bill Gates again. Their job is to help vaccinate against polio and now COVID and other diseases in countries that are poor, that have a large amount of poor people and no real products and no real income. And it has been very well organized. I shared in one of their meetings only, but they're a good group of people.
So it's been pretty amazing, his contribution to not only polio, but to look at other vaccines and help other countries.
Yeah, and you see, although Rotary has tremendous entree to many places, and that has occurred, I could phone UNICEF and ask for the head person and get right through. Rotary has that sort of pool now. Mr. Gates, of course, probably has a direct line. but I've met the man on several occasions. He's an interesting man to meet. Undoubtedly, he is a nerd.
So let's talk about the progress, though. When we, where were we 12 months ago to where we are in the last 6 months in the eradication of. We talked about the wild polio virus, but also about the vaccine-driven polio virus.
Vaccine-derived, not driven. Vaccine-derived polio. From the point of view of the wild virus, as many of people listening in tonight know, it has only been in 2 countries for several years now, Pakistan and Afghanistan. And we were very hopeful this year. We were really on a high because as late as 3 weeks ago, we had only had 2 cases, one each in Afghanistan and Pakistan this year. Unfortunately, in northern Afghanistan, we've suddenly had 4 cases. And I said, oh, damn, to several people about that. But it was pointed out to me, we've done awfully well. And let's be cognizant of the 4 little girls who are now in that awful country as females, paralyzed. Mm-hmm. They haven't a hope in hell of ever having a decent life. So it's very unfortunate from the program's point of view, but it's much more unfortunate for these little girls.
So what's the progress been? When we looked at that map the other day, there was quite a shift in over 6 months or so.
Yeah, we had a huge number of vaccine-derived polio. Now let's see, we've talked about this several times. Let me try and explain quickly. And it's mostly in the African countries, and now it's mostly Nigeria. What happened was that when they were doing the vaccination in these countries, and this is a lot of this is my personal opinion, but I think it holds up, that unfortunately, the quality of the rounds was less than good. So some of the kids were vaccinated well, and some were missed altogether. The ones that were vaccinated, and let's remember, it is a live virus in the vaccine, attenuated so it shouldn't cause disease and doesn't. And these kids that were vaccinated, squirted it out into the dirty water. The other kids who had not been vaccinated, unfortunately, picked this virus up. It underwent some changes. It mutated and became a vaccine-derived polio virus that has some of the same qualities as the wild polio virus, the major of which, unfortunately, is to cause disease and paralysis in some of the children. And so what did we have to do about it? Well, everybody's heard about COVID. They had to go back to square one. They had to clean up waters and do all these things, but also they developed a new vaccine, which is now being used for getting on for 6 months, I think. Time goes by so quickly. It is having a wonderful effect. And I think you saw at the weekend when we looked at the charts, the numbers have absolutely dwindled, which is great. And hopefully Nigeria, which has more than anybody else, will eventually get on the same road and get rid of it. But I don't think we can say we've eradicated and certified the end of polio until we've got that under control and gone.
That's another step.
That again is a personal view.
Yeah. So let's talk about what's been happening in Pakistan and how they've been going out and vaccinating in Pakistan.
Well, in some ways, this COVID pandemic has been very helpful. It's been very helpful not only in Pakistan, but in Afghanistan as well. But in Pakistan, when they were doing rounds, they were afraid to go to many places because there were killings. The vaccinators would be shot, they would be killed. With the pandemic, the government and the Taliban group have allowed these vaccinators into places that they were never allowed to go before. This has resulted in the polio vaccine being given to every child, virtually, age 5 and under, in Pakistan, at least 3 or 4 times now. And what has happened, you know, we talk about numbers of cases. I look at the number of viruses in dirty water. In Pakistan, we have over 100 sites where we get the water, we look at it. And in February, every site was negative for polio. That to me is much more important than the actual number of cases.
Oh, yeah, keeping the water clean, making sure that nobody, you know, that's really important.
Oh, when we were doing Northern India, in Uttar Pradesh, the mothers would not let us vaccinate anymore until we got the water cleaned up. And they were very definite about it. And I was up in that area in the world, and they were not nice people to us because we were trying to make the children be vaccinated so often. And yet we had dirty water. We did a lot of work in the water side of it. I'm sure Ron Denham would be delighted to hear that. And we got rid of polio.
So let's talk about Afghanistan, though. I mean, Afghanistan, when you talk to our club, I think people were quite surprised at the tremendous relationship with the Taliban to be able to get out there.
Let's hope this lasts, Lynda. And it goes back before the present takeover by the Taliban in Afghanistan. You see, all these organizations, as I've learned, have a background backup of people with some brains in their head and some sense. And there was a certain amount of meetings going on about polio, and the Taliban actually attended one of them and couldn't understand why Afghanistan was in such a bad state and being one of the countries still with polio. So they come marching in, and it turns out they've left the same person in charge as of this time. And after an absence of 3 or 4 years, they have permitted that every child in Afghanistan be vaccinated. And a very successful round was done. I have to be quite honest, there were some areas where they still couldn't get in. Presumably the message hadn't got through, but it's certainly a huge, and it's going to be repeated. So despite the AK rifles, etc., that you see, we're getting some headlines and some headway with the Taliban group in Afghanistan. And long may it last.
Yes, for sure. So in Africa, we talked about the fact that it's been certified wild polio virus free.
That's right. Now, wild polio virus, I'm getting you well trained. It's very interesting that they are. August 25th, 2020, they signed the agreement, and it was certified. The whole of Africa was certified wild polio free. It was rather interesting. They called a meeting, of course, we were all on Zoom. Total contrast when in India, we had 2 great big parties. In Africa, we couldn't do that. But nevertheless, I was attending the meeting by Zoom, and I saw the certificate being signed and shown to us all, and I cheered. Just to myself, except Anne heard me and she wondered what was going on. It was a big day in the whole program, and this wouldn't have happened in many countries without Rotary. I traveled in quite a few of them, and Rotary was the only organization, even with Gates on Gates wasn't on the ground like we are. We are everywhere, whereas Gates is not nearly so much on the ground.
But when you think about that, think of the amount of vaccine and the amount of children that have been vaccinated in Africa, millions of them.
Yeah, millions.
Yeah.
Was it 4 billion children around the world were vaccinated last year? I mean, the numbers are extraordinary.
They're absolutely staggering, Bob, to think of that. That's staggering to think that that happens. Yeah. So,
and they're doing a round in Pakistan as we speak, and it's nearly 200,000 vaccinators that are required to go to every house in that country and vaccinate the children against polio. The numbers are staggering.
So let's talk about the risks of that, though. The vaccinators going out and the challenges there.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there were many areas they wouldn't go to. It has improved. It's too long ago for me to remember. I was in Pakistan doing an NID. I went many times to Pakistan, and I got to know a lot of the people, and I used to love going out. Actually, they got a little afraid. They used to come and put a guard on with me, but one particular day I saw this guy who had been sort of in charge of the vaccinators, and he was talking to a couple of the kids, and I took a photograph, which I think you've seen. Mm. And the next day, he and 10 others were shot dead. All they were doing was trying to prevent these children suffer from polio. And in order to overcome this and to help these people, particularly their relatives, we did set up a fund whereby monies can be given, maximum 2,000. Now you may say that's not very much money, but if you're the relatives live in areas where a cup of coffee is less than a cent. So it's the standard of living. You're not going to McDonald's and pay $2 or $3 for your coffee. So it doesn't sound a lot, and it doesn't see them through life, but the Pakistan government have backed this up. And the numbers are, well, the last year I was on this committee, I was part of it very much so. I used to be, in fact, one of the referees to have the money go out. And I think it was about 120 my last year, somewhere in that region. But this year already, we've got 7 Afghan people have been shot dead. And so you see why the vaccinators get a bit scared going out.
Mhm.
Hopefully it's improving, but that is one of the great risks in polio.
Mhm. So when we have volunteers that go out as like the vaccinators go out, and we have volunteers that often go out. So with them, is that kind of risky for them to go out?
Well, I get into trouble with the people in Pakistan and Afghanistan. We've only got 39 Rotarians in all of Afghanistan, and boy, are they great people, especially the man looking after the polio side. But yeah, I ask them not to go, but they have to go. Rotary has to be seen, and they do volunteer, and they're looked after very, very carefully.
But they're pretty brave to go out there then.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. I was in a lot of dangerous places over the years. I had a gun pointed at me on one occasion.
I remember seeing a photo of one of the guards standing behind you with his machine gun when
Yeah,
you
that's
were
right.
helping. Yeah, like that's scary. But anyhow, let's talk a little bit about money now. And we talked about the goal of $50 million annually.
Yeah, well, we've still got that arrangement with Mr. Gates' his group that if we give $1, he will he'll match it up so that it's 2 to 1, or $1 becomes $3, in other words. And we need Rotarians to donate money still. And I know at this time of year, certainly in my mailbox, there's a request every day for some organization or another. And all I can say is I hope that those that are listening or on this call will indeed think about polio. It is important that we do. Some of the clubs in the district are doing very well. I got some figures sent into me today as it happened. And I have to say, I don't think it was anything to do with my talk to them, but Willowdale at the moment are leading the group in our district. We're asking for approximately $45 US per Rotarian. It's not a great deal. I'm sure most Rotarians in our district should be able to afford that. And then from the club, we're looking for $1,500 US. And I can't imagine there are many clubs that can't afford that. From the district, we're still looking for 20% of the DDF. And as I'm talking to the district at the moment, I emphasize that. And let me tell you about our district. It never fails to come up with the money. Now, I certainly make sure it comes up with the money, but they don't need to just because it's Bob Scott asking for it. But our district has been tremendous every year in giving the 20% of the DDF to the polio fund.
We've had a pretty amazing district, haven't we, Bob?
Oh, from the point of view, the very first campaign way back in 87, 88, we brought in over $1 million Canadian dollars at that time. But I see a note now from Dick that our district is in for 20. Well, that's good, you know, because the money that's coming in is less. So to get 20,000 from the district is excellent, because you multiply that by 3, that's $60,000. And if you take $3 per case and divide it by 3, it's a lot of children that are going to be vaccinated.
So Bob, we're this close. So what do we have to do to get all the way?
I think we're getting all the way very soon now. I never have said that, but seeing what I see from Afghanistan and Pakistan, they're the ones that matter. I think we should, I'm hoping that we'll have a whole year of Pakistan polio-free in January, which will be a year. Afghanistan is going to be a bit trickier, but as I said, with the Taliban on side, that looks good. But, you know, the monies, I should go back. The funds that we take are not just for these two countries. We've got a whole heap of countries that unfortunately have very poor medical background, but they need a lot of help. And unless we continue to vaccinate these countries, before you know, we'll have an outbreak. And so the money goes to a lot of other countries as well.
Well, and that's the one thing one has to remember, you know, we're trying to eradicate it, but we still have to go out and vaccinate because there's new children born every year and they need to be vaccinated.
Including all the grandchildren of the group that are listening to this. No anti-vaxxers.
Mhm. So since 1985, and we looked at a graph, it's pretty amazing the amount of money that's been raised since 1985.
Yeah. I can't remember the exact figure I gave you. What was it?
Well, Rotarians have given almost $1 billion,
Yes,
and the Gates Foundation has given over $1 billion.
yes.
Right?
And
So-
Canada continues to, government of Canada continues to give tremendous amount of money. And again,
You said we'd given almost $1 billion just in Canada.
Canada has, and that's not last year, that's over time.
And yeah.
And Canada, of course, I always boast, was the first country to give any money to this campaign way back in '87.
Mhm.
Canada is now about fourth or fifth in line and have continued to punch well above their weight. The US leads with about 3 point something billion, nearly 4 billion. The UK is second with getting on for 2 billion. And then Canada comes in at very nearly $1 billion Canadian. These other figures are US. Canada is about 630, 640 US. They're big numbers, they're big figures.
Mhm. So here's a question for you. When wild polio ends, how can we stop vaccinations when mild polio is still around? We're not going to stop vaccinations, are we? That's the question.
No. Fact, it's considered that we will probably continue vaccine against polio for almost 10 years to make quite sure it's gone, because as we have found out particularly in Nigeria, we thought it was gone, and all of a sudden there were cases again. It hides that virus, particularly in the poverty-stricken areas.
So you see that if we eradicate polio, we'll still be out there vaccinating for at least another 10 years. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what the scientists tell us.
Mhm.
Politically, I don't think that's possible. I don't want to get into politics and vaccination. That's a touchy subject these days. But countries that don't have a large sum of money in their treasury are not going to be too happy if they have no polio cases for a couple of years to continue to put out a lot of money for it. And that's in fact what happened with chickenpox, smallpox, sorry.
Mhm. So Bob, what's the plus of Polio Plus?
That's an interesting question. We originally, of course, as most people know, we were so confident that we're going to get rid of polio in about 10 minutes. And the next part of the hour, we're going to get rid of measles and everything else. But I think the plus of Polio Plus is that we have, as an organization, been able to help these other diseases, and with vitamin A, more recently with malaria, etc., being able to get a real plus. Ebola was a big thing. Our organization got rid of Ebola, or at least got it under good control in Nigeria before any other country. And that was because of the polio campaign. That's a bit of the plus. The ability to work with all the other governments, as I mentioned at the beginning, we never knew as an organization that we could do that. we were fairly young from the point of view of diplomacy. We were an organization of old men or young old men who met, had lunch, as George Bernard Shaw used to say, oh, we know Rotarians go for lunch. And the funds raised were not huge. The work done was always local, very little international. And there had been huge changes occurred in the Constitution to allow us to be international. And I think Rotarians now realize we're an organization to be listened to. And we are. I've had experience of that.
So Bob, how satisfying has this been for you since you've been involved? Like, you've been involved for a long time. So how satisfying is it for you to see that we're getting this close?
Well, it's very satisfying. When Africa, as I say, I cheered to myself when Africa was, when I spent most of my working life in India. I was there 35 times. And when India became polio-free, certified polio-free, and we had the big celebrations, that was tremendous. But really, it's to be giving the drops to these little kids. Maybe, I don't know how we're doing for time. One very quick.
Yep, we're getting there. So we've got a couple of minutes.
Okay, one very quick story which sort of underlines, or two little children. One in Nigeria, I was Nigerians sing. I call them the Welshmen of Africa. They sing beautifully, and they love to sing. And it was a big assembly of, and they were getting the drops to children. They were singing in the background. It was wonderful. And this little kid was brought to me, 6 hours old. And of course, I always go and lift the children. That was one occasion I shouldn't have done because the kid had learned how to pee. And so that was, the second one is really one that Anne was involved in. We were in India and we got news in the morning that about 4 in the morning their time, that our grandson had been born in a hospital in Markham. Beautiful surroundings, lovely new hospital. And we went out with Minister of Health and various other people later that day, and we went to a stable, would you believe? It's at Christmas time, talking about it in a stable, but it was a filthy, horrible dump, really. And this kid was again about 6 hours born to give the drops. And as I put the drops in, I looked up at Dan and I said, this kid's the twin of our most recent grandchild.
Mm.
What a difference. What a, you know, huge, lovely hospital in Markham, and this dump. That's all I could say. Although it was a stable.
Yeah.
And yeah, these are the sort of things. And I've got lots of other stories, but we haven't got time for them.
Yeah.
But that's what gives me satisfaction, remembering that.
So sometimes, though, it seems that Rotary doesn't get as much acknowledgement in the media, let's say, as things like the WHO and Bill Gates and such.
That's right. We battle it. We battle it. We have a staff down there. They do tremendous work. We're going to show a little video, I think, at the end here that is stuff put together by a brilliant staff. And we really, they try so hard. I mean, we've had to build it up. 10 years ago, it was 0 or nearly 0. So that's why we've got nothing. We are getting more. And they, every time they report to us, they tell us the number of times and the number of newspapers, et cetera, it's been in, and it is increasing. But yeah. It also could be so much more.
It is hard, I know that. So we do have a lovely little 2-minute video. I'm sort of hoping that Rotarian Bob Wallace can tee that up for us.
Yeah, and it really summarized what I've been trying to say in about 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to give it a go here.
eradication efforts and the power of vaccines, most of us live without fear of polio. Since 1988, polio cases have dropped by 99.9% globally. Despite this tremendous progress, the threat of polio still looms. Wild polio persists in 2 countries, and outbreaks of a non-wild form.
Uh-oh.
I don't know what's happened here.
It choked itself.
Hmm.
That's too bad.
Maybe we can send a link out to everybody so they can have a view of it, because it really is a great little video.
It's a YouTube, so anybody can look at it, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's starting it again, Bob. It's obviously stopped.
Form, CVDPV are spreading across parts of Africa and Asia. In our connected world, disease can quickly spread, which means polio anywhere is a threat to children everywhere. Persistent challenges, exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, have prompted a transformed approach to achieving eradication. Now, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, GPEI, has a new strategy to reach every last child with vaccines and ensure they and the world are protected from this devastating disease. The GPEI strategy introduces innovative new tools and tactics and redefines the existing approach to urgently end all forms of polio. This includes improving the speed of response to CVDPV outbreaks and introducing a new tool, NOPV2, to end Type 2 CVDPVs. Strengthening partnerships with affected governments to increase ownership of local polio programs and improve vaccination campaign quality. Integrating polio activities with the delivery of essential health services to meet health needs of high-risk communities. And empowering women at all levels of the program. Achieving a polio-free world needs continued leadership and political and financial commitments from governments, donors, and partners. Working together, we can ensure no family has to live with the threat of polio again. Visit polioeradication.org for more info.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Dr. Bob and Lynda, we have a formal thank you, and thank you, Lynda, for monitoring the chat. And I think you did answer a number of the questions, but I'm just going to ask Joseph and John, were there any other questions posed by our district Rotarians that you would like to bring forward?
There were, Beth, this is Joseph here. There are a few questions. I think we had 4. One was from George, and he was asking, aren't we taking too much risk in sending volunteers in countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan for vaccination? And then another one from Eunice that came in, what is the process for recruiting vaccinators?
Okay, so Dr. Bob, would you like to tackle those 2 questions?
Yeah, are we taking too much risk? I don't really think so. The volunteers are most anxious to go, and if they want to go, we can't stop them. We don't, it is a private decision. We have no formal setup for asking for volunteers, so Rotary is not responsible for them if they go. We've been very, very fortunate. I should touch wood here. We've only had one Rotarian die because of being involved in polio, and he wasn't a visitor, he was a local in all these years, despite the other deaths and shootings we've had. What was the second question now?
What was the process for recruiting volunteers?
Yeah, well, we don't go out recruiting volunteers. If they want to go, there are certain leaders. I don't know how active they are anymore. You got to remember, I've been out of this thing for a while. There are a number of Rotarians who organize tours to go with volunteers. I tell you who's on. I think the one or two in this audience have been. I'm sure they have. Bob Wallace himself was, yes.
Mm.
So they're the people to ask, really, not me. I just went.
Right, John and Joseph, any other questions?
Yeah, there was a question about vaccine education. Should we focus on it in view of the amount of hesitancy?
Where is this education to take place? Here, you mean, in Canada?
I'm not sure, Bob. That's the question.
Vaccine hesitancy for polio in Afghanistan, Pakistan is 0 to none. They just ask for it. But talk about it over here, that's outside my purview.
Beth, can I make one comment? It's just a piece of information that somebody might say is useless.
Sure.
A namesake of Bob's in Edinburgh in 1773, I'm talking about Sir Walter Scott, he contracted polio at the age of 2.
That's right.
So the world almost lost a literary genius to polio. But we wonder how many more we have lost due to polio.
Mhm.
Thanks. Bob Wallace posted in the chat, if anyone would like to go on an National Immunization Day to get in touch with him. Okay, any other questions in the chat, John and Joseph, before I turn to District Governor Ron?
There's one from Paul
Okay.
Collier, and he's asking, COVID and flu have animal repositories. Does this apply to polio as well?
I've never heard of it in any animal. It is man for man. It goes from one human to another.
Jim Lauter
I have never heard of any animal.
Jim Lauter has asked the question, re the 4 new cases in northern Afghanistan, how confident are we that there are only 4?
We are not that confident. We're obviously, since it occurred, thanks to the Taliban, we're being permitted to do a very thorough research. And as soon as we get a case like that, there's a whole administration search put into place that follows up and is supposed to report back within 2 weeks. So that if there are cases out there, we don't want them spreading, we've got to get out there and vaccinate all children within sight of that particular case. Now, in fact, where these cases came, the round also went there. The round that was the Afghan people allowed us to do. And so that area has been covered. I don't know how efficiently, but it has been covered to a certain extent already. So that's a positive, that if that has happened, then hopefully we won't get more. But normally when you get a little outbreak like this, you get a few more cases.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to thank you, John and Joseph, for doing that. And I'm going to turn the mic over to District Governor Ron Derrick.
Thanks, past District Governor Beth, and thank you, Dr. Bob, and thank you, Lynda Kay, for a great Tuesday talk tonight. You know, it's a real honor for us in District 707 to have one of the world's experts in the End Polio campaign right here as a member of our district. And Dr. Bob, we can't thank you enough for taking your time tonight, taking your time for World Polio Day to put on a world event that we get to do every year. I can assure you that 20% of our district designated funds, as we have for many years, is going to go to polio, no question. And I really do challenge each and every one of our clubs to come up with that 1,500 US plus per club to support all the great work that Dr. Bob and all the members of the Polio Eradication Committee have done this year and all these years. You only begin to get a sense of the dedication that those on the ground make. It's easy for us over here to just write checks. So let's do that. Let's support them and let's make sure that we end polio now. We're this close. So Dr. Bob and Lynda Kay, we're going to make a donation. I know you don't need any donations. You've already made enough, but we're going to make a donation of $200 for each of you to the polio campaign to say thank you for sharing with us tonight the great update on the polio campaign. And each and every one of us are right here behind you. So thanks, Dr. Bob, and thank you, Lynda Kay, for a great Tuesday Talks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
Thank you, yep.
It was a pleasure.
And a personal thanks to Dr. Bob and Lynda for your time tonight as a fellow Cobourg Rotarian. It's lovely to have you here, and you did a great presentation, so thanks very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn over now to Neelam Betty, and Neelam is going to give us an introduction about our January Tuesday talk on supporting the environment. So over to you, Neelam.
Thank you, PDG Beth. I'm going to keep briefly to the Scottish theme here. Recently, most of you will know that there was the Glasgow COP26, climate change. And a year ago, we had Elizabeth Bagley give a Tuesday talk. Now that was on climate change. And in January, we have broadened a little bit. We are going to talk about all ecological pressures on the planet. And one of the mavens, there are lots of people who talk about the environment, but the maven of them all, Dr. Matthijs Wackernagel, he is the founder of the Global Footprint Foundation. So he will be talking about all the work that goes on, and we are lucky to have him. And very recently, President Shekhar Mehta of RI was in Glasgow, and you may have got snippets of that. And I got contacted by Evanston to say, well, I think you guys are working on a footprint tracker. Can we get some information on that? So I would suggest that all of you pay a return visit in January. I know it will be after the holiday season. So if you can get time to register for that, you will not be disappointed. And as a primer, you can go back to the Tuesday talks that our district is recording on YouTube, and you look at Elizabeth Bagley's talk, and that'll be a good refresher. And Dr. Wackernagel will talk about, what the pressures are on the whole world, both in terms of the climate, but also in terms of other resources. And I think it cuts across all our areas of focus, but then he will pivot on to see what can we do practically as Rotarians. So I urge you all to sign up for that.
Thank you, Neelam. So everybody, thank you for joining us tonight. It was a great presentation, and mark your calendars for Tuesday, January the 11th for the Tuesday talk that will focus on supporting the environment. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish each of you a wonderful holiday season. Stay well, stay safe. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays.